In regard to Jim Jones slandering Nas, I'd like to get your guys' opinions on if you agree with what kind of a conversation that's been happening online. People saying, Nas, is he overrated? We have Jim Jones kind of implying that he's got more influence than him beyond rap with like lifestyle, clothing, his own community. What do you guys think?
I I'll take it. I'll take it first if you don't mind, Q. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
first of all, I got to give Jim Jones love off top because I'm seeing a lot of slander on his name, just for his, in my opinion, outlandish take, which I do think is outlandish. But I'm gonna give him some love off rip. I think his influence within diplomats, within Dipset, also in fashion, lifestyle, you know, New York fashion, high fashion, chrome hearts. Like if you're into fashion in that New York high fashion wave, you're going to understand his impact clothing wise and lifestyle. I give him love from that standpoint. And also he's had a really good career later on in life. Like he's put out some really good music. I think it's gone under the radar. People not talking about. He probably feels a little insulted about that people not really rocking with him. So it's probably where this is coming from. But with that being said, I think his comments about Nas have been way off base, right? And also there's context between these guys two, you know, the history between these two dudes, right? Like we got to remember, Jim Jones is the same guy who said I'd smack Nas Kufi off. Like they have a history of physical violence or just having beef, right, from back in the day. So like
summer in Miami, he said
Thank
back
you.
in summer jam when I told Nas I'll smack off his kufi.
Like,
He said, yeah, summer in Miami. I remember.
Like
that.
I'm not hearing people talk about that. Like this is personally motivated. Like that he's probably giving it up, and also Nas don't talk, right? So he's probably an easy target. You know what I mean? So all that being said, I think his comments are just all base, man. Because if you want to talk about who's more influential, there's absolutely no way in hell Jim Jones has a leg to stand on talking about he's more influential than Nas. Like I don't honestly, I don't even think this is a realistic conversation. I think it's quite laughable. Real talk, it's quite laughable. Nas is legendary. Nas is one of the pioneer, arguably has like the greatest album of all time in hip hop, period. Like you could genuinely argue that with Illmatic. Also, he's a prototypical rapper. You know how many rappers have used Nas's formula and built whole careers and their whole aesthetic and their whole mentality and approach to rap off of how Nas approach the game. Like I think his influence is much deeper than just wearing clothing. And you know, people like Jim Jones, you know, he wants to establish his own aesthetic and his own imprint rather in rap. I just don't like the fact that he's trying to take Nas's name in the gutter to do that. You know what I mean? I just think it's weird. And it's probably personally motivated. That being said, there was a time where Nas did have a lot of doubters. There was a time where people said he picked terrible beats, and I agreed. His beats were pretty boring, guys. Like J. Cole had that narrative for a while. He did. He picked bad beats. There's a such thing as that. But to be honest with you, and I'll wrap this up, Q. Going into the later part of Nas's career, right? The collaboration with Hit Boy, right? King's Disease, you know, Magic, Volume 1 through 3. I don't even think this is a real conversation, guys. Like, what are we really talking about? Nas is not overrated. The answer is hell no. Hell no.
I'm just dying at the fact you said J. Cole picks bad beats.
He did.
He does not. J. Cole has a lot of good beats.
He was rapping over
has a lot of
foreign
good
beats. Stop the cap. Stop the cap. You know that was a
Born
thing too.
Sitter. You know how I feel about
You know that
Born
was a thing
Sitter.
too. Come
You
on,
know
talk.
how I feel about it. Okay, there's a few things I want to say here. There's actually a few things. So is Nas overrated? Absolutely not. Does Jim Jones have more hits than Nas? Absolutely not. But this is something that I see in arguments too often. It's people trying to pick an angle, right, to make a point. And it may not be an angle that everybody uses, but they see an angle They see an avenue, and I understand. So let's get into Jim Jones's head. Why would he say such a thing, right? So remember that argument a couple years back when French Montana said he had more hits than Kendrick Lamar? Remember that argument? Remember that? And people were like, "Oh, you're not going to hear Kendrick Lamar in the club. You're going to hear a French Montana song." And then people were pretty much telling French Montana, list all the songs you have out. And then you look and you're like, oh, actually I did hear that French Montana song in the club. But it's like, hell no, he's not got more hits than Kendrick Lamar. I mean, now with Kendrick Lamar with Squabble Up and stuff like that, Kendrick Lamar has absolutely played way more than French Montana in the club. But at the time, you can see the angle French Montana was coming from. So I kind of see the angle that Jim Jones is coming from. So what I think Jim Jones is trying to say, is that from 1990 to 2010, that's one era, and Nas dominated that era. And Jim Jones is saying, I dominated 2005 to 2020. He's trying to say based on eras. So it's like he's saying I dominated the most recent era of hip hop, which would be from 2005 to about 2020. And so, listen, granted, like I said, I still prefer Nas's music. I still think Nas has more impactful hits. But let's not, like you said, let's not sleep on Jim Jones. Jim Jones had Summer with Miami. Remember that song? I just told you. Summer with Miami.
Of course.
Bottles in the air with Trey Songz, right? He had songs like We Fly High, Ballin'.
Classic.
These were major classic. Everybody knew it. 100 remixes to We Fly High. He had Certified Gangsta. He had a lot of, highly impactful hits. He was on a bunch of remixes. He was on those songs that you can say, when I was younger in 2005, I remember hearing that song all the time. So I get the angle that he's coming from. I get where, he may feel like he has the upper hand, but to me, it's just not that, And my question too, I really wonder how much this has to do with where they're from, right? I'm not from New York. None of us are from New York, so I can't really speak on it. But, Nas is from Brooklyn, right? Queensbridge. And
no, that's Queens.
Jim Jones is from
No, he's
Queens.
from
Sorry, Queens.
He's literally from Queens. Queensbridge. That's Queens. Yeah.
Queensbridge, right? Oh,
Yep.
Queens. Sorry, Nas from Queens. And then Jim Jones from Harlem, right? So I don't know if there's some type of rivalry there. I noticed in hip hop today that Harlem, that's where a lot of those people are making those those Jersey Club songs and stuff like that. Harlem has a movement right now, right? And so I wonder if he's speaking from hey, Harlem, I'm popping in Harlem. I'm impactful in Harlem. Harlem is moving the hip hop needle. And maybe he's like, yo, Queens ain't doing it like it used to. Or, I just really am curious. Because there is something. There is a reason why he feels venomous towards Nas. There's something there.
I've heard a couple of interviews. I've heard his justification. I'll put it like this. This is where he's coming from, right? He's saying, to your point about the eras, right? We have 2005 to, I think you said, I forget exactly what you said, 2015 or whatever it was, right? Jim Jones, while he is not in Nas's, stratosphere numbers wise, accolades wise, right? He feels like his connection to the youth is much more of a linear path. In other words, Nas, in his opinion, is out of touch. Kids nowadays, Nas is an afterthought. He's kind of somebody on the LL Cool J who they know is a GOAT, but they don't know anything beyond that. They don't have a connection to the music. Whereas Jim Jones, on the other hand, because he has a connection to the youth through lifestyle, right? Clothing, the different things. He feels like his connection and his influence is greater. That's really where he's coming from. That's literally all he's been saying. is my influence is better. It's more. It's or at least it's greater than Nas from a lifestyle standpoint. He's not really talking about music. If you listen to him,
but he's
not talking about music.
I agree, but it's to who, right? Who is it impactful for? That's why I think, bringing up the fact that he's from Harlem and then bringing up the fact that Nas is from Queens, is that to who, right? Like Harlem has a different type of energy. I know you've been to New York plenty of times.
Yo, stop it. Yo, please, you gotta stop.
Harlem
I'm condoning this, my brother. I gotta stop you. I gotta stop you. You're playing devil's advocate, I believe, but you gotta stop.
I'm not saying no. Listen, I just told you, Nas. It's not close. I didn't say it's close. I'm not saying. I'm trying to get into his head. That's what I'm saying.
I want to make sure I heard that again. Okay, I want to make sure I heard that again.
Saying
okay, cool.
To Harlem people, Jim Jones probably, Mason.
But that's one borough. That's one borough.
But that's what he sees. He sees Harlem.
But he's not speaking on Harlem. He's talking about in general.
I know he does, but I'm saying maybe his judgment is clouded because he sees Harlem. And like in Harlem, Jim Jones is probably a freaking legend.
I'm sure he is.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure he is.
He's probably a legend. He's more of a legend probably in Harlem than Nas would be, right? But if you go to like Brooklyn, like for instance, us, right? Moxie probably can. I'm curious to hear what Moxie has to say about this. To us, Wale is like, oh my God, Wale is a fantastic rapper. Part of that judgment of how we see Wale is because we're from the DMV, right? But did you see that viral clip of Kai Cenat saying, I don't even know who Wale is?
Wale, what he do?
Rap.
Oh, word.
It's crazy to us, right? But we have this biasness probably that we subconsciously don't even realize because we're from the DMV. Wale's from the DMV. So it might be just because we're from the DMV, we see him as better than or more popular or more impactful than he actually is worldwide, right? So maybe Nas is or maybe Jim Jones, because he's from Harlem and he sees the impact he has in Harlem, maybe he has a biased lens of how impactful he is overall.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
So here's what I'm saying. Here's my response is pretty quick. Okay, you keep talking about his Harlem perspective, which is one borough. And I'm not doubting that. Let's say that's true. Mm-hmm. You and I are having a convo about overall. We're not in the Harlem. We don't know anything about that. That's their business. We're talking about overall. And it's important for us. It's important for us to have that convo overall. Like, for example, you just gave it a great analogy. Kai Cenat said he didn't know who Wale was. Me personally, when I found out how old Kai Cenat was, I was not shocked. I really was not. But most people probably were. But here's the thing. In the real world, Wale's impact and his contribution in music, whether it's Grammys, hit records, does not get erased because Kai Cenat doesn't know who he is. You get what I'm trying to say?
100%. It doesn't. 100%. And I just want to say this real quick. I know we're probably running out of time.
Sure.
I hate that. I hate when people have arguments about impact. That is one of the things I hate the most. Because what is impact? Oh, clothes? Oh, yeah, because Jim Jones has wearing skulls. Like, there's way more to impact than just clothes. Nas has impacted the way people rap. Nas has impacted the way people think. Nas has impacted the way people probably get haircuts. Like, Nas has had an impact in so many different ways, but for some odd reason, when people get on the internet, on Twitter and Instagram, they only talk about the impact somebody has had on how they dress or in the club. That's all that matters.
Yo,
I get played in the club. I'm more impactful.
Yo, bro.
I think you make more of an impact if you're played in a car. Right? If somebody says I was in the library studying for my exam and I decided to listen to Nas while studying for my exam, that's more impactful to me than saying I was played in the club more than Nas.
Fair enough.
It's like, when you talk about impact, they only really like narrow it down to like two things.
I agree with that
not true.
wholeheartedly. And you know, by the way, I hope I have one last word. This is one last point. And this is actually Nas's greatest clapback to Jim Jones. I don't even know if he did this purposefully. Bro, Nas, throughout this slander fest that Jim Jones has been on, Nas announced that he is bringing a casino to his hood in Queens. Big boss moves. Now, remember how everybody gives Jay-Z credit about his business and how that's impactful and his influence and yada, yada, yada? Let's start having this same energy and discussion around Nas, because while Jim Jones is talking about clothes and fashion, bro, Nas not only impact music, he's now going into business, which in my opinion is a very worldly concept that, you know, people who are not just from Queens or Harlem or wherever can feel Nas's impact. So we give Jay-Z a lot of credit for that. His boss moves. Nas is also doing a lot of crazy things.
But
People need to pay attention.
I don't want to like trash on Jim Jones. Like, you know us.
I'm not trashing him. No. I'm not trashing. I'm just saying.
I mean, it's not trash, but
I'm not
like
trashing
compare,
him. Yeah.
right? To me, you know us. Like, we grew up. This podcast probably doesn't happen if Dipset was not, you know, prevalent when we were in high school, right?
Facts.
Dipset is one of the main reasons, like, I actually really love music, and it was because their impact. They had a movement that I thought
Influence.
was really cool.
Culture.
They were influential. So it's not like, you know, there's some bums or something like that, but it's just more so about society and the way people argue certain things. To
That's a
me,
fact.
this argument got out of hand, and I think when arguments get out of hand, people, you know, they start to look at, you know, the specifics of what you're arguing, and it gets diluted. Like, explain impact. Impact is more than two things. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when you talk about eras, Nas is still making. Nas won a Grammy like 2 years ago. Like, come on. Like, so, you know, it's not about Jim Jones or Nas to me. It's more so about, let's have more meaningful, more knowledgeable, more actually like productive arguments when it comes to stuff like this.
Well
That's
said.
Impactful
Well said.
arguments. would you say?
impactful.
Well
yeah,
said.
You know what I mean? Impactful. That's true.
Listen to the full episode. Link below.